Tumbling, burning with white-hot fire, I plunged into the depths of the abyss. Unspeakable pain, relentless agony. Time ceased to exist. Only this torture and a deepening hatred of the hypocrisy that damned me to this hell.
Right here. You are worthy.
All right, let's dive into these Legacy of Kain, Soul Reaver 1 and 2 remasters. Seems like there's a lot of buzz around these games, especially for people who maybe never even played the originals back in the day. So today we're going to try to cut through all that hype and see if they're really worth checking out in, 2024.
Sounds good.
So for someone who's never played Soul Reaver before, what does that mean for them? Like, are they going to feel like they're playing some super outdated game?
That's the big question, right? I mean, if you didn't like the originals, these remasters probably aren't going to change your mind. But if you're curious about the series or maybe have some nostalgia for it, well, there's still a lot to appreciate.
That makes sense. Okay, so one of the things that has me intrigued is all the talk about the story in Soul Reaver. People say it's like this really deep, complex, not your typical vampire tale. What is it about the story that makes it so special?
It's the depth, yeah. You got these themes of revenge, redemption, destiny, even free will gets thrown in there. And the plot itself, it's full of these twists and turns that you just don't see coming. And the writing is really well done, too.
Interesting. I've even heard people compare it to Shakespearean tragedies.
Yeah, and not just because it's all dramatic and stuff.
Okay, now you have to explain that.
Well, I mean, just look at the relationship between Raziel, the main character, and Kain, his creator. It's all about betrayal, manipulation, the struggle for power, very reminiscent of something like King Lear or Macbeth,
Yeah, I can kind of see that.
Plus, there are all these biblical parallels woven throughout the games world, too, especially in the architecture and the symbolism.
Oh, wow, that's fascinating. So yeah, it sounds like the story is a big draw for these games. But what about the actual gameplay? Be honest, does it feel clunky compared to more modern games?
Yeah, it definitely has a bit of a retro feel, especially the first Soul Reaver. It's got that classic Zelda-like structure with, self-contained areas, puzzles to solve, enemies to fight. And there's also some Metroidvania elements in there, like you gain new abilities that let you access areas you couldn't before.
So you mentioned puzzles. What kind of puzzles are we talking about? Anything that's going to have me tearing my hair out?
Well, there's a good mix. Some are really clever. They make you think. And it's satisfying when you finally crack them. Like, there's some that really play with Raziel's ability to shift between the material world and the spectral realm.
Yeah.
But then there are the block puzzles. Those haven't aged quite as well, let's just say that.
Ah, yes, the dreaded block puzzles. All right, let's talk about combat. How does that work in Soul Reaver?
The combat's pretty unique, actually. It's not just about button mashing or anything. You actually have to use the environment to your advantage to take down enemies, like, impaling them, burning them, exposing them to sunlight since they're undead. It almost feels like a puzzle in itself, figuring out the best way to kill each enemy.
Oh, that's interesting. So there's like a strategy element to
Yeah,
it.
definitely.
So we've got Soul Reaver 1, we've got Soul Reaver 2. Does the sequel just build on that same gameplay, or does it change things up a bit?
It definitely evolves. Soul Reaver 2 is more linear, a bit faster paced than the first game. The combat gets some new stuff too, blocking, more weapon choices, things like that. Feels a little more like a traditional action-adventure game, I'd say.
Gotcha. So more action, less of that open world exploration. All right, so for someone coming into these games fresh, what does that actually mean?
It means you're getting a visual upgrade, not a complete overhaul of the game. The Spyro remakes, they were built from the ground up with modern technology. But Soul Reaver, it's more like they took the original games and they cleaned up the textures, boosted the resolution, polished them up.
So they made them prettier, but didn't completely rebuild them?
Right.
That's interesting. And I hear there's even an option to switch between the old graphics and the new graphics, which I guess is pretty cool if you're feeling nostalgic.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
It's a fun way to see how far things have come visually while still being able to experience that original aesthetic. But the big question is, does this approach actually deliver a faithful experience of the original games?
I think so, yeah, for the most part. I mean, the developers, they clearly wanted to stay true to the original games. They didn't mess with the gameplay or the story or anything, which is a good thing, especially for PC players who remember how buggy the originals were. Oh yeah, no one wants to replay a classic game and then get stuck because of some ancient glitch. Though I'm sure some people would love to see a full-on remake,
Oh yeah, a full remake could have been awesome. But There's also something to be said for preserving the original experience. Like, Soul Reaver has this very distinct look and feel, and a remake might have lost some of that.
I see what you mean. Yeah, it's a tough balance, isn't it? Like modernizing something versus keeping it true to its roots. It sounds like they went for the preservation route here.
Exactly. And you know what? These games were pretty groundbreaking when they first came out, both in terms of the story and the gameplay. Even with those like rough edges, there's still a lot to appreciate.
Okay, you've definitely sold me on the remaster, being faithful to the originals. But I gotta ask, what is it about the world and the atmosphere of these games that people rave about so much?
Well, Nosgoth is more than just a setting. It's like a character in itself. This hauntingly beautiful place full of decay and darkness. But you can still see these glimpses of its former glory, like it's a fallen kingdom with all these secrets just waiting to be uncovered.
I'm sensing some major Gothic vibes here.
Oh, definitely. The environments are so detailed and intricate. And the architecture, especially like the cathedrals, it's just stunning. They really nailed that oppressive atmosphere that just seeps into every aspect of the game.
And earlier you were talking about some biblical undertones. Do those play a role in the world building as well?
Oh yeah, for sure. For example, there's a lot of imagery that evokes the Garden of Eden, especially in the early parts of Soul Reaver. And that ties into those themes of betrayal and the fall from grace, which are like central to Raziel's story.
Wow, that's some deep stuff. So we've got this unique story, a memorable world. What about the main character, Raziel? What makes him so compelling?
Well, Raziel, he's a pretty complex character. He starts off as this vengeful wraith, totally betrayed by Kain, his creator. But his journey goes way beyond just revenge. He's forced to confront his past, his identity, his destiny even. It's a story of transformation, both physically and emotionally.
And you can't forget about his design. I mean, a vampire with tattered wings and a jaw that's constantly shifting. That's not your typical video game hero.
No, definitely not. And you can't forget the voice acting. Michael Bell does an amazing job. His performance is both haunting and powerful.
Yeah, the voice acting in these games seems to be a huge point of praise for everyone. What is it about the voice acting that stands out so much?
Well, Michael Bell just gives Raziel this incredible depth. Every line is delivered with this weight of sorrow and this kind of quiet rage. You can feel the centuries of his existence in his voice. And it's not just him. The entire cast is fantastic. Simon Templeman as Kain is just as iconic. The performances really elevate the storytelling to a whole other level.
So it sounds like all of these elements, the voice acting, the world building, the characters, they all work together to create this really immersive experience. You're not just playing a game, you're stepping into this whole other reality.
Yeah, that's exactly it. It's funny, when these games came out, some critics called them like too edgy or trying too hard to be dark and mature. But looking back, I think that's what makes them so unique. They weren't afraid to tackle those complex themes and to go to those dark places.
It is interesting you say that because in today's gaming world where everything is so polished and kind of safe, a game like Soul Reaver feels almost refreshing.
I think so too. Soul Reaver dared to be different, and that's why it stuck with so many players. It made you think, it challenged you, it stayed with you long after you finished playing. These aren't just games, they're experiences.
Yeah, it really does sound like there's something special about these games that you don't find too often anymore.
I think so.
So I'm sold on this for newcomers, but if you're like a die-hard Legacy of Kain fan, I mean, this is a must-have, right?
Oh, yeah, totally. This is the perfect way to revisit Nosgoth, see these classic games with a fresh coat of paint. It's like catching up with some old friends who just got back from a spa.
Yeah, I like that. I like that a lot. Okay, so huge GE cliffhanger at the end of Soul Reaver 2. Would you want to see a Soul Reaver 3? Or should they just leave it alone?
That is the question, isn't it? I mean, on the one hand, it'd be so cool to see this story continue, especially now with, all the technology we have today. Just imagine Nosgoth with modern graphics, new gameplay mechanics, maybe even get to play as Kain.
Oh, don't even get me started. The possibilities are endless.
Right.
But I can also see why some people would say just leave it as it is.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes it's best to let a story just be what it is, with all its mystery and unanswered questions.
A continuation could be amazing, but it could also ruin what makes the original so special. Maybe it's better to just leave fans wanting more. All right, well, sounds like we've covered a lot of ground here. Would you say that Soul Reaver 1 and 2 Remastered are worth checking out for both new and old fans of the series?
I think so, yeah. Especially if you're looking for a game that's really story-driven, has a great atmosphere, a unique world.
Mm-hmm.
It's not really for you if you're just looking for like pure action and those cutting-edge graphics.
Yeah, there are some gameplay elements that might feel a little dated.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
But if you can appreciate a classic game with a few quirks, I think the Soul Reaver experience is absolutely worth it.
So there you have it, folks. If you're interested in a dark, gothic world, a story that's got this kind of Shakespearean vibe to it, and you're not afraid of a little bit of retro gaming challenge, then definitely give Soul Reaver 1 and 2 Remastered a try.
I think you'll be pleasantly surprised.
We'll leave you with one final question to ponder. Do you want to see a Soul Reaver 3? Let us know what you think, and until next time, keep diving deep.